Morning, dear friends. See you, Abby. Welcome back. Morning, Matthew. Rob. Morning, Jonathan. Morning, Katrine. Dear friends, please take a moment to settle in and check in with how your body is today. Maybe we start by stretching the neck and shoulder, and loosening up all the tension and tightness in the body. Taking that final sip of your tea or coffee, or that drink that you have, and seeing what might be supportive to your posture today, and whether that is to sit or maybe it's to stand or lie down or walk, whatever that may be, giving yourself permission to arrive and to settle into that posture choice. And getting curious about what the body needs. Is it more relaxation or more energy in this moment? And just imagine if you're choosing the sitting posture, the spine is straight but not rigid. Just imagine like dishes neatly stacked, one on top of the other. Maybe there's a slight curve in your spine. That's okay too. But sitting in such a way that feels supportive. You're not trying to hold up your posture, but you're allowing everything to come to rest. Allowing each part of the body to stack, one on top of the other. Letting the shoulders drop. Maybe the chin slightly tucked towards the chest if you're in a sitting or standing posture. The eyes might maybe open if you're feeling sleepy, or the eyes might be closed to limit distractions. And setting down all of the busyness, all of the movement, setting down what has already begun. And setting the intention, I aspire to be in the present moment. I aspire to come home to the body, letting the mind return back to the body. And we begin by taking some intentional breaths. Maybe this breath is deep and long, or maybe short breaths. Please take a moment to find that healthy, nourishing breath. And see if you can comfortably lengthen and deepen the breath as though you're expanding the belly and the chest capacity to take in more air, allowing the lungs to expand and open up. Or breathe in any way that feels most supportive for you. And if it's possible, allow the mouth to be closed, lips touching, breathing through the nose if that's available for you today. Feeling the breath coming in and out of the nostrils. Maybe you can hear the sound of the breath in the back of the throat or in the nostrils. If not, that's okay too. See if you can get in touch with the aliveness of the breath as the breath courses through the body. Be aware of the movement of the in breath and out breath. Noticing the shoulders and the chest rising and falling. Noticing the belly expanding and contracting. Feeling the weight of the body where the sits bone presses against the chair or the cushion if you're in a sitting posture, or wherever the body is coming in contact with the surface. The invitation is to get in touch with this full experience of the in breath and the out breath, continuing to deepen and lengthen the breath if that feels comfortable. With each in breath, the invitation is to receive, receive the nourishment of the breath, receiving what is available to you now, allowing whatever's there to be there. And with each out breath, there's an opportunity to set down the busyness, the obsession of mind, to further settle into your posture, releasing and letting go of what's no longer serving you. Breathing in, receiving, breathing out, releasing. Receiving, releasing. Wherever you are now, I invite you to rest your attention to an anchor. Maybe that's a sound. Maybe that's sensations in the body, wherever you feel it most alive. Or perhaps that is the breath, or it might also be feeling the body and where it makes contact with the surface. But with this bare attention, resting it in this place that you choose as your anchor, allowing the mind to come to rest there. And you might continue with the long and deep breath, or allowing the breath to become natural and subtle. No longer controlling or manipulating the breath, but letting the breath just be exactly the way it is. And awareness is attentive and curious, staying with your anchor. Anytime you notice the mind has wandered off, you can breathe a little bit harder to find the breath again and return to your anchor. Not making it mean anything, simply working with patience, with diligence, and with kindness. However, the mind is today works, and however the body is today works. If the body calls for your attention, you can bring your awareness to that part of the body, and then in time, bring it back to the breath or back to your anchor. in your own time and at your own pace, rising out of meditation whenever you're ready. And you're welcome to continue sitting. And notice that transition as you rise. Notice any habits that usually take over as you come out of meditation or as you shift into another posture. Taking time and being intentional. Today I'd like to share with you this word that speaks to the deep-rooted habits of the mind. And these are habits of mind that surfaces when we are in our meditation practice, that we can see more clearly and objectively. And some of you might already be familiar with some of these internal formations. First, we have the 5 hindrances, which are the obstructions of mind. To know them by name and to memorize them so that we can call it out when they rise during our practice or throughout our day is helpful. That is the 5 hindrances are restlessness or agitation, sloth and torpor, which is that feeling of drowsiness, maybe a sinking mind. And then we have the aversion, disliking. And then there's desires and cravings that may come to surface while we're in our practice or throughout our day, running the show. And then there is doubt, skeptical doubt, doubting in ourselves, doubting in the practice, doubting in whatever's in front of us, the mind filled with doubt. And then we have these other reaction or response in our life where there's a stimulus and then there's a reaction or activation inside of us. And this reaction or response can be known as a knot, K-N-O-T. As my beloved teacher and our Zen master, Tai Titnyakan, would say, these knots are the problems of our minds that circulate. They circulate around in the absence of clear understanding. So when we are triggered, when we react or respond just out of this habit, out of these filters that we have, those knots are considered internal formations of mind. And they have us all wound up, and we are bonded by them. And these knots have a stickiness to them. That stickiness is like walking into a spider web and getting wrapped up by the cobweb. These knots, in the Buddhist term, it's called fetters. And fetters are the chains or the shackles that tie down a prisoner. So we become a prisoner of these knots that has us react and respond in the way we do, that has us triggered when someone says that certain word or does that one thing Maybe you can think of now something that one of your pet peeves, or one of the, whether it's very subtle or it's very much a knee-jerking reaction or response. Or maybe it's not yet identifiable, but getting curious about where it is that whenever X happen, you respond with Y. That may be the knot. And there are many knots. So these things tie us down. They make us a prisoner of our own mind. They are our entanglements. They are what we concern ourselves with and what we get ourselves involved in. Thinking, planning, scheming, plotting, avoiding, pushing away, shutting out or shutting down. And as we practice, we get really familiar with where the knots are. And there's the Buddha identify a list of the 10 fetters, the 10 specific knots that the mind has built a habit around. And I'll just read off the list. The first is belief in a permanent self. So inside of believing that there's a permanent self, we believe that we are fixed. I am this way. I am a sensitive person, or I am a blank person. That this is who I am, rather than understanding that, oh, these are conditions of mine. I've been conditioned to be or act or respond in this way based on past experiences, based on the somebody training. But when we consider the qualities or characteristics within ourselves to be fixed and our preferences to be fixed, we suffer. We are caught in a knot. The next one is skeptical doubt. Doubt is coloring of the mind. It's also known as one of the hindrances. And doubt can take us out of our path. Doubt takes us out of accomplishing our goal or fulfilling in our deepest intention and aspiration. Doubt is the opposite of trust, the opposite of faith, the opposite of believing. And then the next one is clinging to rituals, rites and rituals. So this clinging to rituals could be that we have to do this certain ritual before we meditate, before we eat, before we do something. And the way we go about it, it has to be done like this. I think of it, it could be something as simple as that. Maybe even clinging to a process, if we are thinking on a more practical level. And clinging to rituals and rites, spiritual rites, that could also get us caught. And hence, I'm very much drawn to the Theravada school of Buddhism because in Mahayana Buddhism, where I grew up in, there tends to be a lot of rituals. And while sometimes rituals can help us bring the body back to oneness, bring the mind back to the body, and the body back to oneness, sometimes it can be a preoccupation, a distraction. And we get so caught up, so busied in the rituals that we lose the essence of the practice of what the Buddha taught. And the next one is sensory craving. So, having cravings for sense pleasures, having craving for that next experience, that exciting adventure. We can think about all the ways in which we create experiences for ourselves, whether it's a trip, a getaway, a vacation, an experience close to home, or in that moment we're bored, we're looking for something to satisfy the thirst, the hunger for experiences. And then the next one is hatred. So in hatred, there's a whole subcategory of aversion, disliking, complaining. A mind that is inclined to complaining, or just, I don't like this, I don't like that. Always looking for what's wrong. And then the next one is craving for material existence, for fine material existence. So this I took from some of the texts, wanting to be born into a heavenly realm. Inside of this, there's this wanting the experience of just bliss, wanting to only have profound peace all the time. So while that is great that we have that desire, but sometimes, a lot of times when we are just chasing after this blissful experience, sometimes in the new age era, this can be there, or just wanting peace all the time. We are not in touch with the reality of life, of the conflict, of the unpleasant moment, of the tension that may also be there in the full experience of human being. Craving, the next one is craving for immaterial existence. This is believing that we can only achieve permanent happiness in a realm that only exists in the mind. So this is a level sometimes in spirituality where one gets caught that happiness is in that mental realm still. And while we can experience happiness in the mind, happiness that's based on conditions, that now has the mind be happy, we must recognize that that's not it. That's not where we stop. We don't stay on that summit. We're still on the level of mind, experiencing happiness that is still very coarse. This kind of happiness that we achieve or arrive at in the Buddhist practices is beyond that. It's even more subtle and more calming. And the next one is having this conceit of I am. So taking pride in oneself, taking pride in one's achievement, and comparing oneself with others. We can notice when we compare. Sometimes we don't even reference ourselves, but by assessing others, that's a comparing mind. And what is it comparing to? It's comparing others to self. So that conceit, that self-centered habit of mind is also a trap, a fetter, an entanglement. And then the next one is restlessness, which is also in the hindrances. Restlessness, a mind that can't quite be settled, constantly moving, turbulent, agitated. When I think of agitation, I think of like a washing machine. And there's many levels of restlessness when we meditate. We get in touch with the very subtle restlessness that we come to know as suffering, a mental suffering. Because a restless mind is not at peace, is not at ease, cannot rest its attention into the breath or on that object of meditation. It too is suffering. The last one of the 10 fetters is ignorance. Not knowing the teachings of the Buddha or the teachings of universal truth. Right? Maybe we take a certain teaching to be true and real when really it needs to be further examined. And the universal truth is verifiable across all tradition, across time. We can verify it within our own experience that this is true and that, the Buddha is right. He's right. This makes sense. So ignorance essentially is not recognizing suffering where there is suffering within ourselves, first and foremost. We are blinded by our suffering. It's like having a blindfold on and walking through the world with a blindfold and not knowing we have that blindfold on. Or we're in the dark and we're not aware that it's possible to turn the lights on. We just think this is how things are, this is how life is, these are my views, this is my belief, and I think this is true. And suffering in this way, this kind of ignorance, it lacks curiosity. It lacks that ability to question our own beliefs, our values, our judgment. Is this true? Is that so? So to ask ourselves, is that so? Is this true? And to remain in curiosity, because that curiosity is essential to breaking through ignorance, and to surround ourselves with spiritual guides and spiritual friends to help us break through our ignorance, to call us and to remind us. Usually we are the last one to see our blind spots. It is so clear to everyone around us, but we are the last to get it. Hence, practicing in a community is so important. we help reflect the truth to one another and to call each other home. So, our practice to come out of ignorance is usually that's the one of the most difficult, the last one that sets a person free. So these 10 fetters that I share with you are actually when we successfully uproot these habits. They are stages of awakening. I've shared this in the past, but I'll see if I can find the chart again. I think it's really helpful to see where we're headed. Where are we on this path? And to me, it's not so much like I need to get there, but to see where am I on this map? I think maps are really helpful so we can check in with ourselves. I'll share it on the screen here so you can see these 10 fetters put in a very specific order of the stages of awakening or stages of quote unquote enlightenment. Or I like to replace the word enlightenment with an enlightened mind, an awake mind. Okay, so you see the 10 fetters right here in the middle. Once the fetters are abandoned, we have the first stage of awakening or an enlightened being, enlightened mind, which is someone who's a stream enterer. And then the next is a once returner. And the fetters that have been abandoned is the first one, identity, about oneself, right? Taking oneself to be permanent. And then the next is of doubt. And then the third is rites and rituals, attachment to rituals. And it's believed that in the first stage and second stage of awakening, stream enter and once returner, there are these levels of rebirth. So a stream enter will, once you've entered the stream, you'll be reborn again in 7 more lifetimes as in the human form or in the heavenly realm. And then as a once returner, you're born again, once again as a human. And if you have a trouble or you're grappling with this, or there's some aversion or leaning out towards these rebirth, just take it with a grain of salt. Right? Not so important for us to believe in anything that we don't now see as real or true for us. But these terms, such as the fetters, you can see the degree in which where we are in these fetters. The next one is to be free from sense desire, sensual pleasure, sensual desire, and ill will, which is hatred. And you can use this to also see that in people who seem really awake and wise and sage-like. Right? And then the last is of an arahant. So this is the Buddhist term for someone who is fully awakened. So they have been freed from material rebirth, the craving for material rebirth, the craving for immaterial rebirth, the I am conceit. So the self, the sense of I, that maybe the arrogance of self being better than others due to spiritual attainments. And then restlessness and ignorance. So notice how that restless mind and the ignorance, these two are the last to drop away. Okay. And once one reaches this, where the mind is free from these five fetters, these knots, these entanglements, one is free. That is one's last lifetime. And an individual reaches enlightenment, which is that superhuman mind, super enlightened mind. And there's no longer rebirth. So, what is this thing about rebirth? Right? Why is it in Buddhism we are, quote unquote, wanting to achieve not being reborn again as a human? In Buddhism, being born as human is suffering. We are prone to aging, sickness, death, and the full array of distress, of impermanence. And change is stressful and suffering. And so to be free from all these influxes, this change, this constant wind of life, one who reaches this enlightened mind, the super normal mind, freed from the entanglement, no longer has to endure this kind of suffering of being human. And there we have it, my friend, the 10 fetters. And I welcome your comments and your reflections. What's coming up for you? What resonates? Or what are you grappling with or causes you to lean out? Or maybe troubling the mind? I see Rap put in the chat how a fetter gets unknotted. Is that a different process for each person? Yeah, so really when we speak of the process of how to untangle ourselves from the knots, it really is an individual's journey. And through deep meditation, the formal meditation practice, and through practicing mindfulness, we can first be aware of how deep-seated these habits of mine are. So to be fully in touch and aware that they're there, being able to name it, being able to notice it when it arises, or maybe we got triggered or reactive about something, and then coming back to looking deeply at our reaction and seeing what is it that I'm attached to. And that's the process. Being mindful of the knots is the first. Once we recognize and are aware that they're there, then we have something we can work with. And there are things when one becomes developed insight or has an aha into seeing where we get entangled. That's that moment where there's an opportunity to set ourselves free. We experience a shift when we see what causes a restless mind, what conditions, how we live, how we create our lives that lead to restlessness, for example, and we maybe make certain big moves or subtle shifts in our own life that will simplify our life and help support our formal practice, and supports a mind that is inclined to peace and stillness and quietness. So our actions, our intentions, and our intention create the results that we have. And these results are very obvious in the world, and they're also results in the mind. What we're left with when we're sitting on the cushion. The jobs that we choose, the people we engage with, the things that we read and listen to, what we feed our mind with. Also, water these habits in the mind, or they have them diminish if we don't water them, if we water something else, wholesome seeds. Keeping the mind open and curious and flexible, and always challenging those parts of ourself that has formulated this strong sense of identity. Challenging those parts of ourself and also our views. Because ignorance is rooted in wrong view as well. And right view is the very first of the Noble Eightfold Path. The first step to happiness is having wise view. What is the right view? I ask this question. The right view is no view. Thank you for your question. Any other comments, reflection, insights, or doubts? Feel free to unmute yourself, or you're welcome to also put it in the chat as well.
Good morning.
Good morning, Michelle.
I kind of had a question about, I notice with my practice, there's a shift when the things that come up, like the anxiety and just the hard stuff that comes up for me, when I'm able to just kind of breathe into it and let it be there. And I think I've always tried to, be busy or not want to feel certain ways or want to be a certain way or not eat a certain food or be healthy or, do this and that and not the other. And with all the meditation, kind of wondering what happens in the brain, or like, what is it about? There's a complete shift and something happens where, sorry, I was up a lot last night. It was some anxiety, so I can't speak very well. There's just a shift when I am able to just almost like see it and breathe into it and accept it, I guess, or something. And I'm able to almost make a different choice to do something differently, or to accepting it does something to my mind. Maybe I've just never done that in my life. And now that it's slowly happening, I'm feeling like a shift with things. But it was interesting because last night when I woke up with this anxiety, because I had talked to someone and had some hard stuff, and was trying to really be there for them and give them the advice of just being with it and being still and breathing. And then I went to bed and woke up with anxiety myself, taking it all on, and wasn't able to even get to that spot in the night. But then this morning, I woke up and joined you and was able to just really get to a different spot. Anyway, with all that said, just kind of curious of maybe if you have anything to say about how that can happen, or if that's the right way to go with things, but it seems to be better with just some kind of acceptance. I know you said the awareness, so like it's coming up and I'm aware, but then there's sometimes this shift when I say, "Oh yeah," I find my body like not, I'm not like trying to make it go away, or I'm just going to bring back to my breath. It'll go away almost is what my old routine or something used to be. And when I all of a sudden, oh yeah, remember it's here. It's okay. Hello. And then like this shift happens. So anyway, I'm just curious, but it's nice. So
Yeah. Rochelle, thank you for asking that question. There's a lot of neuroscience, that speaks about the workings of the mind when we practice. I was scrolling through my files to see if I could find an image of it. I have some friends who are psychologists and really into all the science behind what happens. But our mind is flexible. There's a neuroplasticity that we once believed that the mind is fixed. You're born with a certain brain. Your level of intelligence is already predetermined. And through studying um, meditators and monks who've trained in this through their whole life, um, science have found that no, our minds are not fixed. We have the ability to train it and create new neural pathways in the brain. So there are certain pathways that have been really deeply grooved into our minds. And through practicing mindfulness and meditation, we can create new neural pathways. So in that moment where, you know, some stimulus or some incident or event happen, a moment that you have cultivated mindfulness and awareness, you are aware as that event, you come in contact with that event. And then in that moment of pause, there's a choosing a new way to respond to it. And that's the now going to that new pathway, responding in that new path, new way. And that is, I think I found it. That is a way that mindfulness assists in this process. Oh, okay. I think I can see if I can share this with you all. That's really interesting. I mean, there's a certain language that's used here. This is through the work of a neuroscientist called positive intelligence. But if you look like, here's the event that occurred, right? That stimulus, and then it enters through, part of the brain. I'm not so big on a lot of the scientific words, but the information flows down through here, and then it goes through the synapses, and this is the old neural pathway. So as soon as it enters, the mind responds in the way that it does, in that conditioned way, whether it's to sabotage the event or to go into a negative thinking or doubt, whatever that might be. And in neuroscience, what they come to see is that in that moment right here, where there's a pause, right? In mindfulness, we pause and then we choose a new way to respond. And so here they call it, our old conditioning of mind, the saboteur. And the sage is that intelligent part of us, the enlightened mind that chooses another way to respond to the event. And you'll see it again here. So this is in the neuroscience. What happens in the mind is that we develop, you see these little strands here, a new pathway, neural pathway. And then it starts to grow and really take root inside of the mind. So how we once respond to things, which is going down this path, now we respond to it newly, and we start to build that muscle. We start to grow those neural pathways in the mind that now is inclined to responding to it in this new way. And then these old pathways, they start to shrivel up. And because we're no longer strengthening that muscle, that part of the mind, that will start to shrink. So thank you for asking that question. What I find funny is when I have meditators who come in, people who come into mindfulness and meditation practice, and maybe they're so busy learning about how this works that they actually don't take on the practice. But it's great once we've practiced and we see the results, we get curious about the working of it. I think that's always a nice intellectual treat to be able to see it from that angle and know what is really happening here. And whether we acquire these knowledge or not, even without any knowledge, any understanding of what's actually happening, a person who devote their life to practicing these the teachings, these methodologies of mindfulness and of meditation can achieve astounding results. Right. I acknowledge today's talk or Dharma share is quite dense. Maybe a lot I've packed in this last 30, 40 minutes. I see. Rob has shared a book from Norman Dodge about the neuroplasticity. Thank you, Rob. The brain's way of healing. Really interesting, fascinating stuff that affirms what Buddhists, meditators, and monks and nuns have experienced without knowing, in a sense, when one experiences, one knows that there's been some radical shifts. But now science being able to explain what actually happened is quite affirming. Any other last words? Something burning that you'd like to share or express?
I just want to pipe in on the same topic. So yeah, the study that these books are coming from is neuro-linguistic programming. It's how you can reprogram your mind by speaking to it positively. So they've taken a lot of words and made a lot of books out of that very simple concept. And repeatedly speaking to your mind positively about how you can do things or think differently eventually establishes that neural pathway.
Yeah.
And it's highly effective. And like you were saying, people used to think that you couldn't change your mind. And then there's the saying, you can't teach an old dog new tricks, which, was like an ageist comment of saying how people couldn't change when they got older. And then beautifully enough, the new neuroscience has proved that it doesn't even apply to age. You can always, at any age, develop the new neural pathways. And in these practices, that's about, new neural pathways that are going to help and heal and make life more enjoyable. And it's just a beautiful thing. So that's my tidbit.
Thank you, Ray. Thank you, friends, for being here, for showing up to practice, to sharing the practice with me and each other. Good to see you, Josh. I'm glad you made it this morning. And I wish you all success as we continue to deeply engage in the practice of mindfulness throughout the day, throughout all activities, as we are engaged with what is happening out there. Also, getting to know, getting curious in each moment about what's happening internally. What's the quality of the mind? What's the quality of the breath? Hindrances. I forgot to answer Abby's question. Hindrances are you see some of the hindrances as overlapping with the fetters. Really, the hindrances are what we notice when we meditate. This is kind of the beginning level of our practice, is to notice these hindrances as they come to surface and working to extinguish them. Um, and the fetters are the next level after we get past the hindrances that are there in our mind, as we work to settle and calm and still ourselves. um, the fetters are on a deeper level, more subtle, right? So they're very deep seated in the mind. um, so you can think of it as 5 hindrances is what we work with on the top level, and then as we become more still and as we dive deeper, the fetters are what's underneath that. Okay. Thank you for your question. And I wish you all well today, and may you continue on this the journey of this day with mindfulness, and may you realize the truth and question and verify the truth through your practice. Thank you, everyone. Bowing to the awakened nature, the Buddha nature, the enlightened nature within you. Ready for takeoff. 3, 2, 1.